Hi, this is Ian Desher, author of William Shakespeare's Star Wars, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi. With Dan Z, this is the podcast you're looking for.
Explanation of the Force, and it gives you an insight to the detail to which he gets into these issues with the Force and these concepts of the bigger spiritual aspect of Star Wars. He's very involved in them, and to be honest, the writers and I feel very strongly when we're bringing these type of episodes to screen that, I mean, George has to be more involved than normal because we have to get this stuff right. Of everything we do, we have to get this stuff right because this is the Force. I mean, this is the whole ball game.
I mean, you got the dark side, the light side. One is selfless, one is selfish. And you want to keep them in balance. What happens when you go to the dark side is it goes out of balance and then you get really selfish and you forget about everybody and you ultimately lead yourself, because when you get selfish, you get stuff, or you want stuff. Mm-hmm. And when you want stuff and you get stuff, then you are afraid somebody's going to take it away from you, whether it's a person or a thing or a particular pleasure. Once you become afraid that somebody's going to take it away from you, or you're going to lose it, then you start to become angry, especially if you're losing it. And that anger leads to hate. And hate leads to suffering, mostly on the part of the person who's selfish, because you spend all your time being afraid of losing everything you've got, instead of actually living.
Do you believe you are the chosen one?
How can I know?
I can tell you what I believe. I believe you will bring balance to the Force, that you will face your demons and save the universe. Remember your training, Anakin. Trust your instincts.
The chosen one. You have brought balance to this world. Stay on this path, and you will do it again for the galaxy. But beware your heart.
This is Ashley Eckstein, Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee to talk about the final episode in the famous Mortis trilogy are two amazing guests to help us break down this fascinating episode. It is from Season 3. It is the 17th episode. It is called Ghosts of Mortis. And joining me to break this down, you got to have some heavy hitters to break down Mortis. So, I brought in two of the best. First, you heard him earlier, I think it was last year, perhaps, Alex, when we talked about Star Wars Visions. Alex Marmor. Alex, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Dan. I'm excited to be here, especially for this arc.
Yes, well, I am glad to have you as well, buddy. This is going to be good. I know you're going to bring your A game, and so is our other guest host. He is the host of Reading Between the Reels, just celebrating their 3rd anniversary, the one and only Craig Dickinson. Craig, welcome back to the show.
Dan, it's so great to be back on Coffee with Kenobi, and I'm really, really excited to talk about this episode.
Well, good deal. Well, you know how this is going to work, gentlemen. We're going to ask for one word to break down the episode. I'm laughing because this is actually the second time we've recorded this. After 700 shows of Coffee with Kenobi, you'd think there would not be technological hiccups, but that is not the case, friends. Stay the course. Stay the course. We're going to do that. Craig, please share with us your one word to describe the episode and overall thoughts on it.
My one word for this episode is predestination. Because it feels like no matter what Anakin tries to do to change his fate that has been revealed to him, he's just stuck on that path. And we see that in Revenge of the Sith, we kind of know where that's heading. I really enjoyed the episode. I thought the irony of that was really, really rich, and I enjoyed the cinematic nature of this episode. I'd forgotten just how beautiful it is and just how well put together it is. So what a great rewatch. I highly recommend everyone go back and watch this episode.
Absolutely. Alex, what about you? One word and overall thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say my one word in a sec, but I am with Greg about how rich these episodes are. I mean, the like this time watching it, I was especially looking for visual symbols and for allusions to other parts of the Star Wars universe, and like, oh my God, there's stuff everywhere. But my word is kind of similar to Craig's. It's teleology. And I'm very happy that we didn't pick the same word. I was worried about that last time I was on the show too. So teleology, you two are teachers, and you both, I think, work on mythology, so you both know this, but I think it's sort of an obscure word sometimes. Teleology, something is teleological if it is about a goal or an end or a purpose. And so the big question for me after having watched these, after kind of letting it soak in, and unlike the first time I watched it, taking a critical eye to it, is seeing like, okay, is the universe here teleological or is it not? Are there known end states in the universe, or is the universe open and the future is yet to be determined? And so I love these episodes because they're confusing, and confusion, I think, is thought provoking. Like, my first instinct was to try to iron out some of these inconsistencies. And the biggest inconsistency I felt was, sorry, Dan, I'm going off here, but the biggest inconsistency I felt was on the part of the father, who seems to have like the climactic line of his is to affirm for Anakin, like, yes, you're the chosen one. And also to affirm for Anakin, the future is not set in stone. In those terms, he used the phrase set in stone. But it seems to be set in stone that Anakin's the chosen one. And so, at least on the surface, those seem mutually incompatible. And my guess is that might just be like my first, like a first glance impression. There might be a more nuanced way of ironing it out so that there's consistency here. And like, I want to save Dave Filoni's reputation as much as possible, so I'm going to take a charitable stance and say there's a way to work it out. But
I think
he's
safe.
Yeah.
I think he's safe. But I know what you're saying. That's why my word is paradoxical. Because I think there are multiple things happening that don't seem to really jive together. You've got fate. Then you've also got free will, because Anakin can eventually choose, but yet he's also the chosen one. And it becomes quite muddy, because all the things seem to be true, and they all seem to be really confusing. And to me, that is the hallmark of excellent storytelling. Well, there are a lot of things, but I think it's pretty important. You have an end goal in mind, and sometimes I feel like things become really ambiguous or unknown or uncertain because we want to set up a sequel, which to me I find lazy and anti-intellectual. And that's not the case here. This is really strong. This is really, really strong. It's allegorical. It's metaphorical. Is it literal? We're going to find out, or maybe we won't. Let's talk about this and break it down. The fortune cookie at the beginning says, "He who seeks to control fate shall never find peace." I brought this up before, but I really like looking at these fortune cookies from the concept of, is this an omniscient narrator saying this? Is this someone objective we can trust? Or is it like Holden Caulfield and Catcher in the Rye, where you don't really know if you can rely on this? To here, we can, but I feel like there's a lot going on. So, Craig, let's break it down. He who seeks to control fate shall never find peace. What do you think?
I love it, but it's a great encapsulation of the episode as a whole. But my first and biggest question is who are we talking about here? Is this directed at Anakin, which I think is probably the first read, or is it about the father? Because both characters seem to be trying to manipulate things to achieve a certain end, and it feels like at least he feels satisfied that the father feels like he has achieved that. But Anakin is doing everything in his power to avoid this fate that he has been. It's been revealed to him what his fate's going to be, and then even having to skip ahead a tiny bit, to have his memory wiped to supposedly avoid that fate. It's still going to happen that way. So it's that, it's the prophecy. It's the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's the Oedipus Rex thing where you're just doing everything you can to avoid it. It's still going that way. So it is kind of I don't know if it even really works. He's not. I think it's a great Easter egg. It's very thought provoking.
Alex?
Yeah, I freaking love this stuff. The fortune cookies are my favorite, like single favorite aspect of the Clone Wars show. It's something I've really missed in other shows. I was really hoping that Bad Batch was going to bring them back as a continuation, but no luck there. So my immediate, I guess I've got a few thoughts. My immediate interpretation was that was about Anakin. And then as I continued watching, I was like, oh, interesting. This is also about the father. And now that we're thinking about it, this might be kind of a non sequitur. But it makes me appreciate that for the fortune cookie to be true. Let me see if I can say this right. For the fortune cookie to be true, you don't need to take a position on whether the future is fixed or not. This is a claim about whether it's a good idea to focus on the future. And that is compatible with the futures being fixed and with it's not. And I think that's interesting because I've had an open question that I think was introduced in episode 2 of the arc, but it might have been 3. It was when Obi-Wan spoke with Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon's... No, it was Anakin and Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon's advice or guidance to Anakin was that there is a third way. He didn't have to... It wasn't the case that his only options were to leave Mortis or to stay and fight, kill, defeat, whatever, the brother. There was this third way. And so I got thinking, like, okay, what is this third way? I don't think it was said explicitly. And then I started thinking about this interesting parallel that I noticed between the attitudes toward the future between the brother and between the son and the daughter, where both dwell on the future. One is dwelling, the brother is dwelling on a desire to change it. The other is dwelling on a desire, the daughter, on a desire not to interfere with it. But both are future oriented, each of which runs in the face of, I think, what the father is recommending, of what Qui-Gon would definitely recommend. I mean, like, our first experience with Qui-Gon back in Phantom Menace was him saying something like, be mindful of your feelings, be mindful of what's going around you, but not at the expense of what's going on in the present. You want to be in the present. He's all about living force, not cosmic force. And that all ties in very neatly, I think, with this fortune cookie that says he who seeks to control fate. I think we could add in parentheses, whether by going out of their way not to interfere or going out of their way to interfere, shall never find peace. And we see that the one of the three, between the father, daughter, and son, the one who I think when they died became a force ghost was the father, which seems like the most peaceful exit. And he's the one who I think in the end came around to the attitude that, like, I made an enormous mistake by being invested in the future. So that is a smattering of thoughts on this fortune cookie, but I really liked it. And I think it ties into a lot of different aspects.
I did too, and I think who is it about? I think it's about Anakin. I think it's about the father. I think they're very much conjoined because we are told in the first episode of this that they are both. The father wants Anakin to replace him because he's the chosen one. He can bring balance to the Force. We're told that the father brings balance, but then again, we ask the question we've asked for the last 3 weeks: what does it mean to be balanced? Does it mean that evil's eradicated? Does it mean that both sides are sort of always in play because you can't have light without darkness and vice versa, right? I'm not an art teacher. I'm not sure how that works, but yes, it makes sense from a philosophical perspective. But this is all about, to me, trying to control your fate. Control is the operative word. Like, this is what breeds anxiety. When you try to control things that you cannot control. All you can control in life is your attitude. So Anakin takes it a step further. But I would argue that throughout this entire thing, while yes, he does fall into lining up with the son, he's manipulated to a very unfair degree by someone who's infinitely more powerful than even Anakin, I think, in many ways, because he is drawing his strength from Mortis, which there are several planets in the galaxy that are even stronger with the Force. Again, Force is an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. Yeah, we know that. This one amplifies it. The son, the father, and the daughter are purely strong in the Force from certain perspectives, not from certain points of view. It's just in their nature, right? So then I think what this shows is a lot about Anakin. I think if this Anakin Skywalker is the one that's in Revenge of the Sith, I don't know if he falls to the dark side. I mean, he does in this, so maybe that's. But he's just able to kind of take a step back. Now he doesn't have the added pressure of what's going on with Padme, and Palpatine still got a lot of time to really get into his inner psyche. But I find Anakin to be refreshing in this episode, and I don't want things to pass before we talk about it. When he goes off, he wants to get the father's blessing before he leaves, and he says, if I don't, it will haunt me forever. What is it about the father that is so powerful to Anakin? It's very a magnanimous, very interesting relationship.
I mean, I'm taking this as not a rhetorical question. I've got some thoughts on it.
It's not rhetorical.
And the show ends here.
That's right. Thanks, everybody.
So I still see a lot of parallels, I think, between Qui-Gon and the father. And I think it's pretty widely accepted that Qui-Gon was that father figure for Anakin. And I've read a little bit about, but don't know a lot about.
For the 5 seconds that they've known each other. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree with that, but I also don't. Because I feel like Obi-Wan is in Phantom Menace, but then I think once we get to Attack of the Clones, he becomes like a brother. And I've heard Filoni, and you've probably heard this too. Filoni has said, I think that's part of the problem with Anakin, because he didn't have a father figure. Qui-Gon could have been that. Yep. But he didn't really get a chance to, because it's a very transient relationship that didn't last very, very long because there was no time. For the brief, however long it took to get from Tatooine to Coruscant, that's probably all the time they had to interact with each other, quite honestly.
Yeah. So it's that, I think that similarity, which I think may just be pretty general, that I see, and that's the best theory. I mean, unless we've got like a metaphysical pull between the two of them. Mm-hmm. I mean, if there's something out there in the Force that's connecting them. But the best thing that I could come up with was just that it looks like there's a kind of superficial similarity between the father and Qui-Gon. What do you think, Craig?
I wouldn't jump real quick. I love it, Alex, and I think you're right. I think we are just sort of drawn. I mean, he's sort of a mentor-ish, but he's very wise to all of them. So he could very well be a mentor to all of them. They both have the great beard going on. They're both very, very wise, and they both very much believe in Anakin and his powers and abilities. It would be strange to me if Anakin didn't feel a connection to the father. So I like that, Alex. But Craig, how would you like to add to that?
So I look at it as I think that Anakin can see the father as a bit of a role model, in the sense that whereas the father very tangibly is striking a balance between the light and the dark side of the Force, personified by his children, I think Anakin feels that same tension, right? I mean, this is post Attack of the Clones. We've seen him go right up to the edge, slaughtering the Tuskens and those kind of things. There's absolutely a tension in him. And so I think that he looks up to the father in a sense that, like, this is a guy who has found a way to live in the middle, to acknowledge that there are both sides of my personality and these two different tensions that are happening, and is somehow at peace by it, which makes sense that also that the father would recognize that in Anakin, that there's a need for him to find that balance as well.
And see, I'm glad you brought that up. I would argue that the father is really not in the middle. I mean, he may a bit more standoffish, or not standoffish, but hands-offish in a way, because he doesn't want to interfere with Anakin, but he has no problem interfering with everybody else. He tells himself, he says to the body of his daughter, I'm an old fool. Now all is lost. He doesn't want destruction. He doesn't want the galaxy to fall into chaos and madness like he fears will happen if the sun has too much power, because he does get more power when the light is extinguished. Selfish versus selfless. George Lucas has this great thing in the Clone Wars DVDs about that. I think it's season 2. No, it's season 3 of this. But I find the connection to be purely, they both are the ones that can bring balance. He recruits Anakin to do that, but then I still find it interesting because I don't find him quite in the middle. The Bendu from Star Wars Rebels, he's in the middle.
Sure.
When something really good happens, he also strikes back at good to make bad have some more balance. It's a very different character, a very different creature, very different point of view. But what I really like about all this is that we call them the Mortis gods, or people refer to them as the Mortis gods. Even though I don't know if that's true. They're gods in the way that the ancient Greek gods were completely fallible, really, really far from the Christian God who was perfect. So, what are these three? They're metaphysical beings. They're literal beings. They are. I find them all to be very immature and very, very raw in their emotions and sort of how they deal with them. I mean, even the daughter, who's the light side, she represents the light side. She's not exactly warm. She's not like someone you feel like you could be close with. Do you know what I mean?
No, she gets angry when Anakin tries to touch her, just to help her.
Yeah, which I think is interesting because she thinks she herself is like this pure vessel, probably, and I get that, but that's not to me. That's not the light side. I mean, it's not that she isn't, but I think she's very complicated. We kind of gloss over her because she doesn't have the dynamic voice that the son does with Sam Witwer. But I'm throwing a lot out there, but I think there's a lot to talk about.
No, I think it's important that the first episode of this arc is called Overlords. I mean, they're not called gods in canon. Like that, we know that they're ancient. We know they're super powerful, and that they pulled themselves out of essentially the main reality so that they didn't cause giant chaos throughout it. But I think you're right, Dan. They're not super mature or super wise. They're just really powerful and really old. More than those are kind of their defining traits.
And very much removed from social structure too.
That's true too.
Yeah, I think we mentioned the Greeks earlier, but I was thinking about that too here. I mean, the idea of fallible gods. What I've been thinking about, I'm not sure what the general consensus is on this, but what I've been thinking about with the emphasis on the importance of the present moment and not of the future, which I think is a corollary of emphasizing the importance of the living force versus the cosmic force. I've just been learning about Greek mythology and religion for the first time.
Cool.
But my understanding is that what was almost unique about the Greeks is that their gods took the form of man, in contrast to, say, the Egyptians. The gods were local. I mean, they had a summer place in Athens. And I think that we see some of that come out here. I felt like, I wrote down the name of this place, but I don't remember what it was. It wasn't the Well of the Dark Side. It was where the Blade of Mortis was. That looked a lot like the depiction of Hades in Hercules. And I got thinking, why is it that the sun isn't able to get to this blade? What is it that the sun is so afraid of when it comes to this blade? What's the relationship between the blade and the sun? Does it have something to do with death? And that's as far as my thinking got. And I was really excited that I was specifically going to be talking to both of you, because I wanted to know what your thoughts were on how specifically Greek mythology might overlap with what's going on here.
Well, the thing that stands out to me about Greek mythology, and like any great mythology, or one that at least we pay attention to as a culture, is it represents the belief system of the time period and in the culture in which the story is being presented. Ancient Greek culture is as clearly male dominance. Women have they pretty much have no rights of any kind, which is very different from ancient Norse myths in Scandinavia and things like that. The things I see here is, besides the fallibility, is the importance that is presented with choice and fate. The Greeks are very, very big on fate. The three fates. Of course, Perseus interacts with them before he can take out Medusa, one of the three Gorgons. And Perseus knows what he needs to do. He's been told he has to, but he still has to enact it. He has to get the special talisman and go on his journey. Very Joseph Campbellish. But the interesting thing about this is the fact that these gods, like you said, Craig, they're overlords. They're so mega powerful. But yet they don't treat, I don't think that they treat the Jedi as less than. Whereas the ancient Greek gods, the human beings are gnats or cattle. Zeus denies fire from them for a really, really long time. And it's stolen from him so that they can survive. I don't know. It's a good question, but it's all over the place. It's not so much a Greek connection so much as a mythological one.
You saying it's all over the place really captures the way that I feel about this arc. I think it's part of, I feel emotionally turbulent after watching it because I don't know what to make of it. And also because I don't know what it looks like to look too closely. I don't know how many levels down I should be looking. The symbolism is just everywhere. I mean, I don't remember who, one of you a few minutes ago tossed out the thought that the Mortis overlords took themselves out of time, took themselves out of reality. Well, I mean, it's kind of interesting. It feels like in universe, yes, they're out of reality, but also kind of outside of the universe from a viewer's perspective. This seems totally removed and perpendicular to what is happening to the rest of the Star Wars universe. I mean, that's part of why I love this arc so much. Just like, whoa, this is a deep mythos stuff. And so, but yeah, all of this is to say that I feel like I can just find layer after layer of potential symbolism, much of which might be wishful thinking, but it's kind of hard to tell where it ends.
I don't think it's wishful thinking. I think you're on a lot of the pulse of a lot of things here. The father is just so endlessly fascinating to me. In fact, even though the son's the coolest, I think he's the least interesting. He's the most predictable. The father says to Anakin, I believe it's Anakin. Yeah, he says darkness. He says the Force is strong here. He says darkness has no hold here. Darkness has no hold on Mortis. Maybe his meteorology is different than mine. But since the daughter has died, it's only darkness. And everyone is scrambling. So to me, it looks like darkness has hold. Or is the father really playing one on us where he believes that there's going to be hope? He believes there will be redemption through Anakin. And not necessarily redemption of the son, but sort of redemption to the father's meddling into things. So when I see the darkness has no hold here, I scratch my head and I think, does he believe that? Is this part of the motivation? Or is he just saying this is temporary? All things are temporary. The only thing that is constant is the Force. And I'm kind of leaning that way.
It's so many questions. I don't know.
What if you did know, Craig? What do you think you might say?
Well, I just wanted to say too, Alex, you can't dig too far. There's just no way. Just keep.
That's
just keep
right.
Going.
Otherwise,
absolutely.
Otherwise, I'm going to cancel the show.
No, that's what we. That's literally what we do. Can you go deeper? Yes. Do it again. Keep going. One thing I'm fascinated by is the fact that it's stated that the son has not gone over to the dark side until he does. We see that happen. And so even though he's kind of this representation of, we assume, of the dark side of the Force, he's not. And so I don't even know how to reconcile those two things.
And wasn't he already?
It seemed like he was, but it's like the father. And again, do I take it with a grain of salt that the father says now he's gone over to the dark side?
I think it's when I think it's once he takes the balance away and the daughter is killed. That's my opinion, and I want to circle back on what Alex said earlier. I do think, and I've said this through all the episodes we've been looking at the Mortis trilogy, I think sometimes we have a tendency to look deeper into things that don't actually exist because we want it so desperately to be more deep and profound. But it's not always the case. It is the case here, I think.
Agreed.
Yeah. So Anakin, both Qui-Gon, when Qui-Gon shows up as Liam Neeson, which is wonderful, they both say, trust your training, you trust your gut, and let the Force guide you, because the ultimate question comes up, in order to stop the son, I've got to kill him, which to me, again, is the perpetual myth of redemptive violence that we have in society and culture in Hollywood. Ultimately, Luke beats that when he defeats the Emperor because he surrenders his lightsaber. If not through the intersection of the Force, through, Anakin Skywalker restoring balance, it doesn't happen, right? Qui-Gon says to the son, says to Anakin, there's another way. Find another way to defeat the son. You don't have to kill him. What is the other way? Not rhetorical, also.
No, this is where he sends him to the well of the dark side, right? And
think about that, by the way, well of the dark side. What a great metaphor for what we all have inside of us. This well of different passions, and how do we
face your demons?
Yes,
and
exactly.
It's underground. It's apotheosis, Dan. He goes underground. It's almost a literal baptism by fire too. Love that symbolism. It's very reminiscent of what Mustafar will be as well, and this is where we get to see the first vision of Vader in this series, and we get to hear the Imperial March a little bit, and it's like he has to face that instead of being afraid of what he could become. He has to face it down and acknowledge that is a very real side of his personality.
Right, but I also feel like he's unfairly. Well, I shouldn't say he's unfairly labeled because we know what's going to happen. This is also very close to when they made Revenge of the Sith, so all those little morsels are out there for us to chew down and enjoy. Alex, what do you think? There's a lot here.
Yeah, I mean, the question on the table is, what's the third way between simply abandoning Mortis and killing the brother. And I kind of, when that moment came on during the show, I kind of paused it and I was like, okay, what's the logical space? Logical space is stay on Mortis, kill brother. Stay on Mortis, don't kill brother. Leave Mortis, kill brother. Leave Mortis, don't kill brother. So we've got 4 options. So the third and fourth options are stay on Mortis, don't kill brother, and leave Mortis, do kill brother. And I have a feeling that the second one probably wasn't what they like. I don't think Qui-Gon was saying, no, listen, Anakin, you got to think bigger. You can kill the brother and then leave. I don't think he was telling Anakin to think with more grandiosity. But I'm not sure. I mean, clearly, I think Anakin did kill the brother. And so whatever the third option was, Anakin doesn't seem to have taken it. And you mentioned redemptive violence, Dan. I mean, that's the same thing that allowed him to overthrow Sidious at the end of episode 6. That's his thing. Redemptive violence is that's the Anakin Skywalker move. And then we see a Luke parallel, I think, between the father and Luke on the Death Star at the end of 6. The father had this line. I wrote it down right here. I knew there was good in you. I don't remember whether Luke said that. I think he did, though. I mean, I think we have a line in the original trilogy that says, "I know there's good in him." We have the same line from Padme, right?
Yes, yeah. There is, and then Luke says that to his father. Luke says it to Leia as well.
Yeah, and so long story short, I really don't know what to think, but I don't know where my thoughts will conclude, but these are all the thoughts that I'm having. I'm really not sure what to make of it. It feels like an open loop, but I'm sure it's not.
Yeah, it's not, but it's also so expertly crafted that there isn't a clear answer. And I think that's the genius of the episode. Like, there's a legitimate, not an answer, but and yes, we have questions, but we have some sense, Qui-Gon says, dig deeper, you'll find another way. And ultimately he does, because just like the fortune cookie, everything, when you try to control and force everything to be the way you want, how you want, in the fashion you want, instead of just being your best you in that moment and taking a step back and letting life kind of play itself out, letting the Force guide you, I think that's ultimately what Anakin does. I think the redemptive stuff here is him redeeming the father. The father gets to this place. Actually, let's say the ending for the end of the show. Let's talk about the vision. I said this on the live show this week. When we see Padme and Obi-Wan and one of the, I'm assuming it's supposed to be a youngling, although I don't recognize that person from Revenge of the Sith, where Anakin does that horrible massacre in the Jedi Temple. And then the Emperor shooting his Force lightning, and then seeing the really quick black helmet of Vader, and hearing the music and the great breathing. It can't be understated how insanely powerful that was when this first aired. We hadn't seen a lot like that. We didn't see any Vader in the Clone Wars before that moment. We hadn't had anything since the ending of Revenge of the Sith. A couple of years go by, and then we get this. It's probably been about 4 or 5 years since Revenge of the Sith when this one aired. So that was a massive, massive deal. Again, before Unlearn What You Have Learned, right? It was before Rebels. It was before the Kenobi series. It was before Rogue One. It was before Ahsoka. Of course, it was before all those things. This is a big deal because it, again, cements for us. I think that's one of the things we like about Anakin. It's so easy to be the Monday morning quarterback. We're like, oh, yeah, well, he makes these errors and mistakes. Yeah, he's human. He's so human. That is why he's relatable. If we do want to pull something from ancient Greek mythology, the greatest heroes in Greek mythology were the ones that were the most human. They had a special trait or a talisman or several talismans in the case of Perseus, or special abilities that made them unique. But it was their fallibility and them overcoming challenge and great adversity, mostly internal, that makes them so relatable. And Anakin, the path to evil is paved with good intentions. And he believes, I've got to team up with the son, like he later will with Sidious, because I got to be all powerful to stop this stuff from happening. Well, we know, of course, that is not the case. Sometimes the things are going to happen. You have to take a step back. So it's understandable that his passions kind of get the best of him. But I just want to throw out that it seems so erroneous to judge someone, albeit when he does terrible things, when we all make choices every single day that may not always be the greatest for everyone, but in that moment it just seems so right. Again, not advocating for evil, of course, obviously the opposite of that. But I think it makes Anakin one of the truly only dynamic characters in Star Wars.
I mean, I think you're advocating for a very good, very Jedi thing, which is compassion. And we can say that some happening, some action was objectively a bad thing that happened. It's regrettable. We wish it hadn't, but have compassion for the person who did it and understand without condoning. Right. I think that's completely the right move. And it's these moments like the Vader flash forward, like the moment when he comes up above the well of the dark side and talks to the father and says, "But I'm going to cause so much pain." It's those things that really make me say, oh my God, Anakin's just a man who's been told he's going to do terrible things, and he has feelings. He's an agent. There's a lot going on inside of his head and inside of his heart. And that was, I think, one of the first moments where I really felt like I believed in Anakin a little bit more than I did than when I watched the prequels. Same. I was like, oh wow, okay, like this is someone who's pulling at my heartstrings. I'm on his side now. He's not whiny. He's not a teenager. He's not entitled. He's a big feeler with enormous responsibility. And like you were saying, Dan, I mean, yeah, I didn't see this episode right when it came out. I only caught on to Clone Wars in like, I think 2012. So it was a little bit later. But it was just so cool to see Vader stuff on screen. Yes. I mean, we hadn't been treated to Vader appearances in Rebels. We hadn't had even that little Rogue One scene. I mean, there had been nothing. And so it was just like, whoa, this really does connect to Revenge of the Sith. And like I've always felt like Clone Wars Anakin is my Anakin. Like that's who I kind of imagine when I think of Anakin Skywalker.
Oh, I agree. I think it's the best version of Anakin. And no disrespect to Hayden, it's just I think there's most rich storytelling, and there's plenty of canvas here. More time to do it. Craig, as we're talking, I'm starting to think. I think, wouldn't it be cool? This is really kind of blows my mind. What if the father, and this is all speculative. What if the father is the conscience, the Jiminy Cricket of the Force? What if? What if the father is like, boy, all these things are going to happen, and we're so powerful, and you really should prevent this from happening, but you also kind of step back and let things happen on their own because you don't want to control it. You know, destinies can change just as quickly as the love in one's heart can fade, is what the father says. And he's very, very calm. I love how sometimes he's very, very intense and frenetic, and sometimes he's super, super chill, right? I think it's interesting. I the more I see, I love that every time I think about this and every time I talk about it, every time I watch it, I go from, no, this is all metaphorical. Like the first episode of Mortis, I'm like, no, this is metaphorical. Second one, I'm like, nope, this is real. This is it. Yeah. And then this one, I very much vacillate between both schools of thought. And it's brilliant.
So a thought had just occurred to me. So the father says that the son interfered, went forward in time or something, acknowledges the fact that the vision that Anakin had is real.
He broke the rules of time. Yes, by sharing Anakin. And
what I wonder is, did all of the overlords know? Since they exist outside of time, do they know? And did the father, more to the point, did the father know Anakin's fate before he brought him to Mortis?
He says several times that it's cloudy.
Okay, so what I was going with was even if that it's one of the possibilities, is one of the reasons that Anakin was brought to Mortis was to take him off the board, to have him not become Vader. I mean, we know that they want him to take the father's place, but did he also possibly want to have Anakin avoid that fate?
I like that. I don't think he knew about Vader. I don't even think he knows what Anakin saw per se. All he knows is that Anakin saw something that the father had a good hunch. Look, if you're going to be the one who's to be balanced and the son's so drawn to you, then there's obviously some dark side stuff going on in you too. Again, everybody does. Anakin's is just stronger because, the way he was raised, single parent household, taken away from his mother at a very early age, sees her killed in essence, lashes out in this psychotic episode that would cause all this horrible trauma. And then he's raised not to really be attached to anybody. But he also is supposed to be attached to everybody too. So that's a lot for anybody to have to handle. Plus, everyone's telling you, by the way, you're the greatest human being that ever lived, and you're going to save the entire universe. Now, don't have too many emotions about it, but that's what you're going to do.
That's the thing too. I was going to say, because he is the chosen one and has been told that he's the chosen one for a while, he is probably much more susceptible to, yes, I believe in that vision that I saw because I'm, predestined to do this, and all of his the future is kind of written that like that's kind of he's been programmed to accept those things. So I think a little bit more readily. So I think he'd be more susceptible to accepting that vision was real.
Do you imagine if he didn't meet Padme and he used that line like when he was trying to pick up chicks? Hey, I'm the chosen one. That'd be interesting. Okay, I'm probably going to cut that out.
No, you should keep that. We have a moment. There's a moment like that in one of the Harry Potter movies where Hermione's like, Harry, she just likes you because you're the chosen one. And he's like, well, I am the chosen one.
I went right there with that. That's great. Yeah.
How you doing? That's right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Craig, that's really cool. I've never thought about how Anakin might have been kind of conditioned to think of the future as fixed, and how that might kind of reverberate through his attitudes towards a lot of future-oriented things. I mean, if he's the chosen one and that's a fixed element of the future, well, then what else about the future could be fixed? Like he sees these visions of Padme dying. Well, if he's the chosen one, then Padme is going to die. And yet he's got this interesting, what'd you say, Dan?
And he thinks he can fix her.
Right. And that's weirdly inconsistent.
Yep. And this is post Attack of the Clones, so he's already seen his mom die after having a vision of that. So there's just more and more of those.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes feel like with this arc, it's the writers just being like, hey, what if we had 3 episodes where we raise all the questions and incompatible answers that float around in Star Wars and let people play around with this and let it soak in? And it's like, I don't know, almost a meta episode. And hey, it's removed from the reality, so that's okay. I'm struck by your idea of the conscience thing, Dan. I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, it really when I see him interact with Anakin, it sort of hammers that home too. There's the ending. The son is interesting because he clearly suffers great pain and great remorse and great sort of ebullience sometimes at what he does. At the end, the son says, "You betrayed me," which again, come on, man. You're killing people. You tried to kill your father. Who's betraying who? But again, George has talked about repeatedly, the dark side is about being selfish and about possessing everything for your own, like objectifying things. He desperately wants to leave this planet because it is a prison for him. And then we suddenly get this idea that in order for him to truly be destroyed or defeated, the father has to die too. Why is that?
I mean, the father makes a comment about that. His power is the source of the son's power as well. So it's kind of like
he's the middle, the balance.
I guess
if you kill the balance, then everything dies. That seems counterintuitive to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this too. I really wasn't sure what to make of that line. My brain immediately went to like, okay, maybe there's like a mechanistic explanation. Maybe somehow they're actually connected in the universe, and removing the father will somehow remove the son. And then I got onto this whole Night Sisters thing, and I was like, wait, is the son just powered by the father? And probably no. Although I don't know if you noticed, the father's eyes are almost identical to Mother Talzin's eyes, which I thought was really weird. They've got... oh God, this is embarrassing. I can't remember the names of eye parts. The white part is black and the colored part is green.
Iris pupil.
Iris pupil. So I thought that was weird, but probably not the explanation. Oh, I've gotten this just popped into my head. I've got a thought. So part of what was motivating, I think, the son to leave the planet was that he believed his future lay beyond it. And I think the reason he believed his future lay beyond it was because he wanted more power and because he was being told, you can't leave. And if the father's gone, I'm not sure that the constraint then is gone. And if the constraint's gone, there's not really there's not anything fueling the son. He can go wherever he wants. The anger, the resentment, the lust for more than some other person, more than his father, the lust to usurp his father's position is gone, and that's the source of his power, right? I mean, what do you guys both think of that?
What do you think, Craig?
Makes sense. Yeah, he's outside of. And you just blew my mind, dude. I'm like, how am I going to follow that?
I don't know what to think of it. It's another great thing about this arc. I mean, this has always been my favorite arc. And Dan, when you texted me and you were like, "Hey, do you want to come on the show and talk about Mortis?" I sent my group, my like friend group, a message being like, "Oh my God, he said we're talking about Mortis," and they were like, "Dude, that's so cool." It's these things, these like very, very unclear aspects that make me so excited about this arc.
I think it's important when we think about these three characters, the father, the son, and the daughter, this little trinity. I think it's important to point out that not only are they infallible, but we tend to think of them as, no, the daughter is the light side of the Force. The son is the dark side of the Force. No, they aren't. I don't think so. I think they are the personification, a lot of the attributes and qualities that we tend to personify in the light and the dark side. But they are just as emblematic of it as Anakin or Maul or Vader or insert Jedi or Sith here from any era of the timeline of Star Wars, past, present, or future. They have those qualities, but they're just an aspect of that. So when you kill the daughter, the light side didn't die. I think sometimes we kind of feel that way. Or when the son is destroyed by his father and by Anakin, who can only just kill him with his lightsaber after the father has died too. That energy field that connects them all together, I think, shows us that this is really heavy. It's really important, but it's more important because of how introspective we are about Anakin and how introspective Anakin is about himself. It's not really telling us more about the Force or giving us answers about the Force, but what it is doing is adding more perspective to the Force and more muddy clarity of the Force, which again is very paradoxical because you learn a lot, but you also don't quite understand what is going on. And I think that is deliberate. At its core, one is selfish, one is selfless, and there's got to be a little bit of both to try to create some sort of harmony, not only within yourself, but then that it kind of spreads out throughout the universe as well.
You know, there's one other thing we learned about the Force in this arc, I think, and it's that there exist beings whose form is determined by the people who are looking at it. Right? That was almost a throwaway line, I think, in one of these episodes that said they take the form that that is, I think, in the mind of in the other person's mind, and so that kind of got me thinking, whose mind are we seeing from? Is this all from Anakin's perspective? You
mean when they're a gargoyle and a griffin? Is that what you mean?
Well, that's not clear to me. I'm not sure whether they meant when they were just a gargoyle and a griffin, which seems implausible because we know that Ahsoka and Obi-Wan were carried away by something. Right. So I guess one question is how to make sense of this line, that they take whatever form appears to the viewer. I think this might have been in the first episode of the trilogy.
It must have been.
Yeah. I rewatched the 3 of them tonight, so it's a little bit blurry.
I can see that.
Anyways, yeah, it's
that tracks for sure. When the father dies, he says, "What's the last line?" He says, "But beware your heart." And you mentioned this earlier, Alex, but he's the only one who disappears. The rest of them, their bodies stay intact. Which means he's gotten a little bit more Force training to continue with his conscious self into the afterlife. So then what happens to them, we don't know. But I think we have a habit also of thinking that did Mortis happen or not? No one ever talks about it again, and that's true. But then in Rebels we have, this is the Mortis gods, and here's this temple that someone's trying to break into. There's certainly allusions to it at the end of Ahsoka, although that's very, very clear and not super well told, unfortunately, the last episode anyway. So we don't know. But it does seem, the way they kind of look at each other when Rex is trying to get in touch with them at the end, that they do know what happened. But it's almost like they look around and are like, hey, let's not talk about this. Let's keep this between ourselves. It seems weird that they wouldn't tell Yoda about it, and maybe they do at some point. Either way, it's like a Thanksgiving feast of allusion and metaphor, and it's just so paradoxically incredible. So let's do this, guys. Let's give a letter grade for the episode, and any final thoughts or points that you want to do as we wrap up, because it looks like we're running a little bit long, but there's so much to talk about, so I understand that. Craig, what about you? Letter grade and overall thoughts.
This is tough because
sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. I watched all three of them today because I needed the context, and it's hard for me to separate them because they work so well together. So if I was to grade the whole arc, A+ off the charts. This episode, I was going to just say A, but after talking to you guys, I'm going A+ on this one too. Right. Because I now need to watch it again because it asks so many more questions than it answers. And again, Alex, we're just going to keep digging deeper as much as we can. There's so much more. And now,
eventually strike oil.
Eventually we will. I have so many more things I need to go back and look at because I got pretty much was just looking for story beats and character motivations, and now there's symbolism and music cues and cinematography and all these other things that I want to dig into as well because there's so much more meaning underneath the top layer there. So loved it.
Alex.
Yeah, this is also getting an A+ for me. I mean, even before the rewatch tonight, like if I have had a long day and I want to watch some Clone Wars, this is always the arc that I put on. And it's my favorite part of Clone Wars, I think, except for maybe some of the cool season 6 stuff. I like the weird mythology, fantastical things. So this arc is an A+ for me. I really like all three of the episodes, but I think that if I had to pick one to be my least favorite, it would probably be the middle one, if I'm remembering correctly. And I mean, it all kind of blurs together, but by my memory, I think the middle one is a little bit less lore heavy. I think there's a lot of action. There's some setup of the kind of mythos we get in episode 3 in the second episode. And so it felt necessary, but not quite as like tantalizing as 1, where you're like, oh my God, what's this weird thing happening? And then 3, where it's like, whoa, we're seeing all sorts of cool Darth Vader stuff. Did this actually happen? Who's the father? Wow, everyone died now. So, and I guess my overall thoughts are like yours, Craig. Like I could rewatch and rewatch and rewatch, and like I would love to be able to install these episodes into the minds of experts in all of these different areas, like the world's foremost Greek mythology expert, and be like, hey, tell me everything you see here because I want to know what's happening and what's being hinted at. So I guess those are my scattered overall thoughts, and it gets an A+ for me. I love this arc.
I'm going to give this one an A. It's not an A+. And it's interesting. So obviously we've been breaking this down for the past 3.5 weeks. Actually been a month because I took the week of Halloween off, now that I think about it. But I watched every episode 3 times. And I had not seen them since the original time I watched them, and that was when they first aired. And I purposely wouldn't let myself watch them together because I knew they would all jumble together because they do. The first time I ever watched this, the first one was my least favorite, and the third one was my favorite. Now I'm the opposite. The first one is my favorite, and I think it's always, for me, becoming is more interesting than being. The setup, I think, is just really intriguing and fascinating. This episode is really important because I think of Anakin showing himself that he can overcome. He needs help, but we all need help. But he can overcome and he can fully bring balance, but at great cost, at great sacrifice and great expense. The Father has the greatest sacrifice. All he gives himself up. But he gives himself up so that his Son will not destroy the universe because of his caring about the universe? Maybe. But it seems to me he's doing this because he doesn't want his Son to do a bunch of things that he will possibly regret. Because we do see small elements of remorse when he visits his sister. He clearly has a connection with his father, even though it's a really warped one. But it's still there. I think the father believed that his son could be eventually redeemed, but then he just went way off the deep end. It was too late, and then he had to get the Mortis dagger out. Interesting stuff. Really interesting stuff. The arc is great. I'm a little bit different in that I couldn't watch it again and again because I wanted to blow my mind every single time. And I fear that if I kept watching it, it would become sort of blasé. And I don't want it to be blasé because I think it's really, really rich and profound.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
This has been everything I dreamed and more. Revisiting the Mortis trilogy on Coffee with Kenobi has been absolutely incredible. And it's because these powerhouse guests that we've had on that we've learned from, and it's been great to pick your brains and just, you help me kind of see things in a different perspective. So I appreciate you both and all of you listening very, very much. Craig, please let everybody know what's going on with your podcast and where they can reach out to you and find you. And most importantly, thank you so much for being back on the show.
Oh, no, it was my pleasure. Absolutely. Reading Between the Reels, our latest episode, by the time this drops, will be on The Hunger Games. We revisit that movie as we get ready for The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I know that's not a fan of Dan's because of the way that it doesn't end. But we had a good time talking about that. I'm actually teaching that in class at the same time. So that's
cool.
Kind of fun time to revisit that. But yeah, you can find us. We're a bi-weekly podcast, so every other week. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, we're on there, and just about any social that you want to look for us, we're on there. Read Between Reels. We'd love to hear from you.
Reading Between the Reels. He's always got great stuff going on his social media and really, really compelling conversations too. So thanks, man. And Alex, what about you, buddy? You've got a wealth of Star Wars passion and knowledge. And where can people reach out to you if they want to continue the conversation?
Yeah, people can now go to alexmarmor.com. I finally have a little landing page set up. So that's Alex, M as in Mary, ARMOR.com. And if you want to learn more about me and my work, I've got a link to my LinkedIn. I've got an email form, so feel free to reach out. Otherwise, it's been a real treat to be here, Dan. I love coming on these. And like I said, there is no episode I would rather talk about than the Mortis arcs. So thank you.
Hey, man, thank you. Thank you both so much.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here.